Hello, and welcome to the Narrowing Path, Walking the Spiritual Walk. My name is Stephen Anderstein. Thank you for joining me tonight as we do the chapter review for chapter 16 from the book I Was a Pagan by B.C. Kitchen. Right, here we go. This is one of the original printings from Hodder and Stoughton in England. This is the one I actually read out of. This is the one I will be referencing. This is just a modern reprint of it. Facsimile reprint of it. It's exactly the same pages, page structure and everything for it. So looking forward to it tonight. And just again, wanted to say thank you everybody for your support for the channel. Really appreciate it. There's been a lot of great stuff coming around and good feedback, good interaction. And I'm glad y'all are enjoying the shorts that are coming out and checking everything out that we got going on out there. That's including we have an Instagram page, we have a TikTok page, Facebook page, all that cool stuff. So go ahead, give us likes, give us a subscribe where appropriate, and look forward to your interactions. So thank you again. I appreciate it. So let's go ahead and get this going for this chapter 16 from I Was a Pagan. And I do want to say when we get started, again, even for this chapter, there's a lot of references to Christianity specifically in this chapter. And I want to make this, my goal of this podcast isn't to be necessarily a Christian only style of podcast. I want to be more inclusive of people that have different spiritual paths and religious practices. But I know I won't catch it every single time. So please bear with me. But no, we're talking in general on this podcast of a much broader understanding of spirituality and a God of your understanding and a power greater than yourself as you see fit to define. So I wanted to say that at the beginning of this because this whole thing, the chapter title is The Business of Being of Use to People, which outright you wouldn't actually necessarily associate that with anything necessarily religious. That being of service concept comes in a lot in recovery and spirituality talks, but it doesn't really have necessarily being of use to people can mean a lot of things, right? But the subtext of it is called creativeness, which is an interesting subtext when you are talking about this type of content, especially in the reference to the chapter title of The Business of Being of Use to People. So I'm going to read right where we start in this chapter. And it's about, the second half of the first paragraph on page 234, if you're following along. And he says this: I know now, however, that the most creative work is to create in people first a longing to know and then a definite knowledge of a living Jesus Christ. So right out the bat, he is giving us the context and what he means by creativity, what he means by being creative, right? He's not talking about just an artistic influence on something, or an artistic expression of some sort, or an interesting way to present. He's talking about more so helping to facilitate someone's ability or someone's experience of having a spiritual awakening, right? To having a spiritual experience overall, right? So that's what he means. He stated a definite knowledge of a living Jesus Christ. And in a spiritual context, to make it a little bit more general, was for someone to have an actual spiritual experience, to have a belief and a knowing that there's a connection to something greater than ourselves, right? It's not just us going through this world. He wants to inspire this energy that he labels as creative energy to help create people that are aware of this spiritual domain, right? So it's a different kind of take on that word creativeness, creativity, and I actually kind of like it. I enjoy the way he implements it, right? Because what is of everything we could do, what's the most creative thing? What could be the most worth our time to actually be a part of creating? And that's helping facilitate and helping connect someone to a God of their understanding and have that spiritual experience that this pretty much whole podcast is about, and start living a different way of life, right? So he equates this really to creativity as being an inspiration for somebody to have their own spiritual experience with a God of their understanding. That's kind of the way to sum it up, in not necessarily Christian terminology. And there's a lot of people that have taken that mantle on. There's a lot of people that feel like that is the sole intention of what they're here to do. I mean, to be honest, that's one thing that I hope to do when starting this podcast, is put information out there and to put a perspective and knowledge that might help someone else connect to this power greater than themselves, whatever that looks like for them too, and give them some hope that there's a different way to live, and that there's a different type of thinking and different type of experience you can have right here, instead of resigning yourself to potentially a miserable existence, you know? So it's a pretty substantial thing to grab onto. And he's opening the chapter with I'm going to say he's notorious for doing this. He puts a lot of big concepts right at the front. I guess he doesn't shy away from telling us what this chapter is going to be about right out the gate, which is nice. So, next he goes into why in this next chapter, or in the previous chapter, how the advertising wasn't really the solution for the church. It was the message that the church was bringing, right? So I'm going to read a little bit on 235 as to his follow-up from that, really. A creative minister, therefore, must be a prophet, not simply a performer. And yet, even prophecy is not enough, for the word of God passes over the heads of those who are not alive to God. I'm going to skip a couple of lines in that paragraph and jump to the truly creative minister must not be simply a prophet or spokesman for God, but must also, as I have suggested, become an actual changer of lives. Okay. So it's not the advertising, it's not the events that attract people to a church. You know, in the previous chapter, we talked about how the spiritual nature of the congregation or the gathering or the people practicing said religion or spiritual practice will demand and attract to it a person of appropriate leadership and quality to guide it, right? And what he's expanding on here further is it's not enough to just be a promoter. It's not enough to be a performer. It's not enough to just be a prophet, right? It's essential that you actually become somebody that's willing to help facilitate someone's walk to this God of their understanding. Not just talk about what it's like, what you should be doing, the instruction in the sense of a grand scale thing, right? You're not just listening to sermons or giving sermons, but you're actually trying to help somebody connect and to have this spiritual experience. And he's talking about there that talking to people that don't know God, that don't have a personal relationship with that power, that source, that energy, that God of their understanding, or he in his experience, Jesus Christ, a energizing sermon still will fall on deaf ears because they're not hearing the actual message, right? They're not actually in a place to receive a perspective like that, right? So there has to be a part of a leader of these churches that is willing to engage people on a personal level and actually help facilitate that connection that we always talk about here, that spiritual experience, that spiritual awakening, whatever you might. Some people call it a mystical experience in some spiritual practices, metaphysical experience, transcendental experience, whatever you want to call it. But the best teachers or the best leaders are the teachers of this experience. And also, they don't take credit for it in the sense of, look what I did, I changed you, but they give you, they help facilitate the connection. They leave the change in that power greater than themselves, and all they do is show someone else how it worked for them. This is very similar to 12-step mentality. This is very similar to a clinical perspective to say someone with lived experience can share that with you to give hope and direction, right? So it's still alive today. Again, early 1930s. This was written, and we're still figuring it out today, how well it actually works. It's funny, we kind of stepped away from it for a little bit, and we're kind of getting back to it in different kind of roundabout ways, right? And it's interesting that he uses the phrase changer of lives there. I think that was it specifically, right? Yeah. As I have suggested, become an actual changer of lives. And I was thinking about that, and every single time we talk about helping other people, we have to be willing, we have to have had that experience ourselves most times, right? Or of a similar nature, then we can actually speak to it. So if we want to be the changer of lives, if we want to help facilitate that connection, we have to walk through it ourselves first, right? We have to actually have our own personal experience with a God of our understanding. And then when we have that experience and we can speak to it authentically and genuinely and share that in a sense of goodwill and altruism with somebody else, because we just want them to have the same experience or have that same connection that we have, right? That's how you can actually get a serious how you can actually get a steadfast grounding and a ability to actually help someone, right? You have to have an actual spiritual experience yourself to actually get them connected, because that's the only way people actually change and grow anyway. Every other way is us just trying to manipulate and control this world. But if we're able to actually have an experience ourselves and then share that experience we've had with somebody else and how to do it, they can have their own as well. So it's just changer of lives. We have to start with us first, then we can bring it to others. So, but what's interesting there is he doesn't leave it just in the hands of spiritual leaders in the sense of what we would normally associate them as spiritual leaders. I mean, we're talking about ministers and the priests and the rabbis and everybody that has that similar type of title, gurus, self-help extraordinaires, right? We have a lot of people out there right now in the self-help world that can really pack a hotel and a stadium, even some of them, like really big ventures. And but it's more than just those people, right? It's more than just these popular figures or these people with this title and this descriptive authority, right? This is something he goes on to talk about, that this is the responsibility of everybody. This is not just your church leader. This is not just your meditation group leader, your yoga teacher, whatever it is. This is your responsibility to bring into this world. This is your responsibility, like it's my responsibility to bring into this world and to share with other people. Because part of this is we've had an experience. It would be selfish of us to actually hold on to it. But also, if I want these other people to keep sharing their experience and keep helping other people grow, how can I demand of them to do it if I am not willing to do it myself? Right? Like, I can't sit here and say you should be sharing your personal experience with the God of your understanding to help facilitate people's connection when I'm not going to go do it. When I don't have the willingness or the compassion or empathy or patience to actually go help somebody else myself, right? In whatever way I can do that. So we have to maintain that willingness for us too, because the Spirit, you don't know when someone's going to be open to receiving the message. You don't know how it's going to actually be received by them and in what environment, in what state of mind. So keep that in mind. We are all here to be of service to the God of our understanding and our fellow man. So it's that choice to live differently. Don't live selfishly, live to be of service. We talk about that a lot on this podcast, that I'm here to be of service to this world, to this God of my understanding, right? To actually put into this world instead of take out of it. So I want to go ahead and actually, on that note, move into the next section I wanted to read with you. We're going just over to chapter or page 236 here, and it's starting at the fact about 4 lines down. So, the fact that I am in the advertising business, not a professional minister, does not excuse me from working towards the same goal. And the fact that I may write books rather than sermons does not excuse me from the task of writing as a prophet, nor does it then excuse me from that second and equally essential task of creation, the bringing of people whom I have interested to a definite experience of Christ. I stumbled over that so much when I read this chapter for the actual chapter reading, right? But he's saying that it's our responsibility to put this into everything that we do. It's our responsibility to practice this in all of our affairs. I think he might even say that at some point in this chapter. Yes, he does. On the next page, he talks about that. But so whatever your profession is, no matter what social circles you hang out with, no matter what your engagement is in the world, it's your responsibility to bring this spiritual message with you into all of those areas, right? To practice the way, this principled living, this virtuous living that we've been taught from these respective spiritual establishments, or these spiritual practices, religious practices, whatever you might want to call them, right? Whatever that connection to a God of your understanding has helped you facilitate, and the direction that you've received from that. Excuse me. It's our responsibility to do that. And doesn't mean you've got to go change and be a minister. That's what he's saying here. You don't have to go and start a church. You just bring it into your job that you're doing right now. You bring it into the relationships that you have right now. You bring it into your marriage, your friendships, right? And that's where it actually shows up. We bring it in all that we do, thought and conduct and behavior and habit. And what occurs then is people become attracted to you, right? There's a principle or a tradition in 12-step groups. It's called attraction rather than promotion. No one wants to be, very few people would want to be yelled at on a street corner, or someone ministering to them when they weren't planning on having that experience that day, right? But when someone sees how you're living, when someone actually can tell that you're a changed man or a changed person, and wants to know how, wants to know why you're operating differently than everyone else, wants to know why that in advertising you're one of the honest people, right? And how that works for you and what inspired that. That is what attraction rather than promotion actually means. By the way you live, people will know there is something different about you. And then you have to actually be willing to share your experience and then allow them to share theirs. Allow them to actually confide in you. That's actually what he goes into next. Also, all of these chapters, just as kind of a side note, are titled "This Business of," right? And in this chapter, it kind of tells you why he titled it that way. At the bottom of 236, it says, "It has failed to further the business of real life," right? So he writes these. Each one of these chapters is a breakdown of the business of real life. So this business of living a different way of life, and each chapter is a different section, which seems self-explanatory, but I do like how it all could be wrapped up under one heading, this business of real life. So I thought that was kind of interesting that he put that in there. But we're going into this next part, though, where he's talking about you have to conduct yourself in a way that's attractive to people, and then people are going to approach you and ask you, why do you conduct yourself this way? Why do you actually live this different way of life? How come you stand out from everybody else that does it this other way, that works in this field in other capacities, right? Like you become distinctly different because you become a man of character, an individual of character and principle and moral and integrity, right? Because you're living a different way of life. And what that'll do is that'll bring people into your circle. That'll bring people into your life that are looking for help facilitating this connection that you seem to have because of the way you actually live, right? So he talks about even writing this book that if people aren't getting spiritual growth out of it, right? If this isn't helping nobody, that he's kind of failed at that endeavor, right? He wants to offer his experience for someone to relate to. And he gives this, and when that happens, because it will happen, if you have a spiritual experience, if you're having a spiritual awakening, and then you go and put that out there available for other people to actually engage with, you're going to get people to approach you and say, what's going on? Now, there's this very big next step, and this is what he's talking about with helping facilitate this, right? Helping to be creative. Because there's the inspiration to change, but then there's the facilitation to the God of their understanding, right? That actually allows them to change, right? You inspire the change by your own personal conduct, the sharing of your story. But what is that piece that helps facilitate it? And he talks about it, how he would always share his experience with people and all this other stuff, but he never wanted to actually stop and listen and ask the other man, hey, what are your problems? What's ailing you? How did he phrase it? He said, I asked him what his troubles are. I did. A life was changed. That's it right there, right? Because when we talk about our own personal struggles, we open the floor up for someone else to connect to us. We open the floor up and we provide a safe space for people to go, yeah, me too. But you have to be willing to that, yeah, me too part. You have to be willing to actually allow them to tell you, to be attentive, not just hope it gets over soon, not to tell them they're wrong, not to tell them that they need to change their entire life, but to be present and to listen to them as they pour their heart and soul out to you because they feel like you'd understand. Right? What a beautiful blessing it is to have the privilege to hear that from somebody. When someone chooses you to just reach out to and connect to for help. That's that spirit of service that's always talked about when helping people, and in 12-step practices, right? That 12th principle, or that the principle of the 12th step is service. And it's this type of service. Again, this is the Oxford group, which Alcoholics Anonymous branched out of, which then inspired the rest of all the 12-step programs. So they're all based around literally some of the same fundamental principles, right? But this is that important piece, right? This is the attraction piece. And then we share our experience, and then we ask them to share their experience with us. And suddenly they're not alone in the world. Then suddenly they can actually hold their head up high. Suddenly someone else is saying, yeah, me too. And it's okay. And this is how I got well. That is powerful. That is, and he says it even in the book, this is some of the most important work he's ever done. And he talks about it in the sense of the businessmen that he's had approach him, right? The other advertisers that he's been able to actually show a different way to live. He labels that as his most important work in his entire life. Helping someone connect to this God of their understanding. And I got to tell you, that's been my experience too. Anybody that I can actually sit down and help, whether it's someone suffering from substance abuse or alcoholism, or whether it's codependency, grief, whether it's mental health, whether it's just life is just hard for them sometimes, whether it's including anxiety, depression. If I can sit down and share with someone my experience, and then they feel comfortable enough to share their experience with me, and trust and have a little faith that it could be better. What a blessing. What a blessing that is. That is the most important work that I've ever done as well. And he talks about how, we want to influence, and he's tried all of these ways to help correct these areas of life, like what he talked about, politics and business, and helping the social services field and education, right? Like we've talked about all these places in particular and how we've wanted to actually have an impact on them. And in each one of those previously in the book, we talk about how he had to change himself, right? But then in this chapter, he talks about he changed himself, and then he shared his experience. And when others were changed, they went out into those fields, right? He talked about how he was never able to reform the business enterprise himself, but he helped a businessman connect to God, and then business changed for that man too. Right? It's that one thing at a time. He talks about how he could never help correct a church or help a church realign. But he shared his experience with a minister, and a minister then had an experience with a God of his understanding, right? How he couldn't change the social services field, but he was able to help a social worker who then changed it. An assemblyman changed politics. A school teacher helped change education in his school, right? So when we connect with the people that are a part of these larger facilities, or that are a part of this way of life, that in these areas of life that we want to help, that is how people actually get help. That is how things actually change. You go to the people that are a part of it, and you connect, and you have the opportunity to facilitate an experience with a God of their understanding, to have a spiritual experience, to have a spiritual awakening with that source, that power, that universal energy, that God of their understanding, Jesus Christ, if that is what you choose to believe, any other definitive religious practice, whatever it may be. But when that individual takes it back to their field of work, and they change their behavior, and they place themselves into a position that displays their integrity and their changing of ethics and morals and principles, and then other people go and approach them, right? They're bringing this spiritual experience with them into the world. That's practicing these principles in all your affairs. That is attraction rather than promotion. That is this living piece that we all struggle with sometimes. So, to close this out this week, I want to go ahead. I'm going to read the last paragraph here. It's on page 239. I'm going to read where it's the proclaiming all the way to the end. Proclaiming the kingdom of God and winning people to Christ is not the business of the minister alone. It is not the business of the advertising man alone. It is the business of the architect, the plumber, the housewife, the farmer, the schoolboy, and the president of the United States. It is the duty of everybody, and not only in a church or on Sunday, but every hour of every day. It is, in short, the surest standard of usefulness for anyone, anytime, or anywhere. All right. So again, it's just this restatement and buttoning up of the fact that it's not just on Sundays, it's not just on weekends, it's not just in evenings, it's every minute of every day we get to practice this different way of living. We get to bring it with us in all of our interactions, our thoughts, our behaviors, our beliefs, and our intentions. Right? It is all of our responsibilities to carry these messages, to carry this different way of life, to carry these experiences. It's not just okay to resign ourselves, to let someone else do it, and we'll just keep living our life selfishly. We have these experiences to give them away. And I do want to say one thing, that we talk about this kind of stuff, and I bring it up, and I believe in it. And I want to caution one thing, though. Remember that our role is to share our experience and then help facilitate someone else to have their own experience with a God of their understanding. Remember, we do not change people. We walk with somebody as God changes them, as that power changes them, as that spiritual experience occurs for them. It has very little to do with us when the person actually changes. But what we can do is help facilitate that. And that is an amazing opportunity we get. But we got to remember, we are not God. Excuse me again. Some people forget that, right? We can't save the world, but we can help other people save themselves by coming into contact with a God of their understanding. And then maybe that way we can slowly save this world one person at a time. So, amazing chapter. Shortest chapter in this book, by the way. Absolutely, I love it. I love the message of this. I love the responsibility that VC Kitchen talks about in this chapter. And it's something that needs to be talked about more, in my personal opinion. We don't hear about this stuff very often, right? How we have to have a responsibility to not only live this in every moment of our days, in every area of our lives, and share our experience, but also allow someone else to connect with us and share their experience with us, that they might find that spiritual connection too. So, absolutely love this stuff. Looking forward to the next chapter. Next chapter, just as a preview of coming attractions, is chapter 17. This business of getting ahead in life, growth. It's another longer one as well. It's about, I think it's 17 pages when I looked. So we got another good one coming up as well. Second to last chapter of this book, then we will be moving on. And maybe we'll talk about a little bit about that next time too, as to what we're going to be going on to. So I am looking forward to it. And thank you all for joining me tonight for the chapter 16's review of VC Kitchens. I Was a Pagan. And we will be back again next weekend for the chapter reading of chapter 17. So I'm looking forward to y'all to reading that to y'all next weekend. And until next time, thanks.